Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Today we are going to learn about the action potential in node of Ranvier. Action potential is a propagating change in the resting membrane of a neuron. I'm going to write it. Uh, Action potential is a propagating change in the resting membrane of neuron. In other words, we can also write it as a brief depolarization and repolarization in a neuron, which leads to the transfer of information across the axon. These are the definitions of action potential. Action potential is actually a propagating change in the resting membrane of a neuron. Not a simple change, a propagating change, the change which spread, which go through the axon. In the diagram, we can see that this is a neuron. This is the axon part of the neuron. In this axon, we can see that this is the internal environment and this is the external environment. In the internal environment, we can see that internal environment is negatively charged, while the external environment is a positively charged. This shows a resting membrane potential. Resting membrane potential is the actually the electric potential of a membrane of a neuron when the neuron is in resting state, when the neuron is not passing any signal, when the neuron is not passing any impulse. At that state, the electric potential of the neuron remains minus 70 millivolt, which is called resting membrane potential. Resting membrane potential is the electric potential of a neuron when neuron is not passing any signal. We can see in the diagram that normally the internal environment of the neuron remains negative, while the external environment outside the membrane of the neuron or outside the membrane of the axon remains positive. It doesn't mean that the internal environment is completely or absolutely negative, and it also doesn't mean that the external environment of the neuron always remains positive. It means that the internal environment is comparably negative and the external environment is comparably positive. These are comparable. Comparably, as comparable to the external environment, the internal environment is negatively charged, and as compared to the internal environment, the external environment is positively charged. If we go to the detail, the external environment is always neutral. The external environment of the total body, of the whole body, is always neutral, while the internal environment of the whole body, or each and every cell of the body, every cytosol of the body, is always negative, is always neutral, is always neutral. All the cells, cytosols, all the external environment, all the internal environment always remain neutral. But then why the internal environment uh, is symbolized over here as negative? Why this is symbolized as negative? Because the internal environment is negative as compared to the external environment. It shows that the internal environment is comparably negative to the external environment. This is in comparison to the external environment, the internal environment is negative, and in comparison to the internal environment, the external environment is positive. Though the external environment also contain the chlorine ion. The chlorine ion is always negative, but that is not shown over here because this is comparable, because this shows the overall charge of the external environment as compared to the internal environment, and the internal environment also contain a lot of potassium, but still this is symbolized as negative because the internal environment is comparably negative as compared to the external environment. So If we have a micro electrode and we insert the micro electrode into the cytosol of a neuron, and we connect that micro electrode to a voltmeter. For the very first time, the micro electrode was inserted into a squid neuron. The neuron of the squid is always very large in size. That's why the squid is an animal, a sea animal, whose neuron has been used for the long been for the electric potential, for the action potential, for the resting potential, for various types of experiments regarding the action potential and resting potential, and the membrane of the electric potential of the membrane of the neuron. So if we insert the microelectrode into the cytosol of a neuron and we connect that microelectrode to a voltmeter, what will happen? This voltmeter is also connected to a reference electrode over here, and that electrode is put near the membrane of that neuron. Not this reference electrode is not connected with this membrane, but this electrode is put very near to this membrane. This electrode is in proximity with this membrane, and this electrode is inserted into the cytosol of the membrane. So what will happen when we insert it into the neuron, and this neuron is in rest position and this neuron is at rest? What will happen? We will see that this voltmeter will show the voltage of minus 70 millivolt. This will show minus 70 millivolt. This minus 70 millivolt shows that this neuron is at resting position, and this electric potential is resting membrane potential. This potential is resting membrane potential. This minus 70 millivolt is resting membrane potential, in which the internal environment is minus 70. This minus 70 shows the voltage of internal environment. This do not show the voltage of external environment. This shows the charge or electric potential of internal environment, which is minus 70. And this minus 70 is this reading has been shown as a comparable parameter. This is shown as a comparable, but because if we put this electrode inside the cytosol, we cannot have this minus 70 in the absence of this electrode. If we also put externally an electrode, then we can get this minus 70 millivolt. So this minus 70 millivolt is a comparable reading. So this comparable reading, this shows the resting membrane potential of a neuron. The resting membrane potential. Now coming toward the action potential. And what is the action potential? Action potential is a condition in which a neuron is stimulated, and that stimulus is beyond 15 millivolt. The intensity of that stimulus is greater than or equal to 15 millivolt. If the intensity of the stimulus is not greater than or not equal to 15 millivolt, it will not lead to action potential. That will be below the threshold of the action potential. The threshold of the action potential is 15 millivolt. That should be minimum 15 millivolt. If this is below the 15 millivolt, then that will be subthreshold or electrotonic potential. I'm going to write that over here. Sorry, this is not working at the moment. So the electrotonic potential. Electrotonic potential is the potential of electric charge below 15 electric potential or below 15 millivolt. Below 15 millivolt, the electric potential is called electrotonic potential. So this is electrotonic potential. Electrotonic potential is not going to evoke a stimulus, is not going to produce an electric potential, or is not going to produce an action potential. Electrotonic potential is not going to this electrotonic potential is also called subthreshold potential. Subthreshold potential. If the intensity of the electric potential is greater than 15 millivolt or above 15 millivolt, then that can evoke an action potential. Then that is threshold electric potential or threshold action potential. So I'm going to explain this. In this diagram we can see that normal, this is the resting state of the neuron. At the resting state, the neuron is having minus 70, what it is having, minus 70 millivolt electric potential. The membrane is having minus 70. It shows the internal environment potential. So if we give a stimulus and the intensity of the stimulus is, this is roughly about 10 millivolt. If the intensity is 10 millivolt, this is not going to evoke an evoke an action potential. This is not going to propagate the signal. This cannot propagate the signal. What will happen? This will go again to the rest. But if the intensity of the, again, once again, the stimulus is given over here, and that stimulus, the intensity of that stimulus is very high, the intensity of that stimulus is greater than 15, because that is from minus 70 to to 50, roughly to 50. So if the intensity of the stimulus is greater than 15, then it will evoke an action potential, and that action potential will show a very sharp peak over here. This sharp peak represents the depolarization. The sharp peak shows the depolarization during an action potential. Action potential is having two basic steps. One is the depolarization and the other is the repolarization. This peak shows the depolarization and this peak shows the repolarization. So I'm going to explain it in detail. Normally, the membrane of the this this membrane shows outer environment shows positive charge, and the inner environment shows negative charge. But over here we can see an action potential. Action potential is the transfer of positive charge from external environment to the internal environment. The transfer of positive charge from the external environment to the internal environment through the membrane, and that transfer of charge from the external environment to the internal environment leads to the change in electric potential, and that change in electric potential is actually action potential, which ranges from minus 70 to plus 30. When we measure that with the help of electrode, that action potential will reach from minus 70 to plus 30. This can be shown in this diagram, that when the resting membrane potential, which was minus 70, as we have figured out in the previous diagram over here, that was minus 70. But if this membrane is passing signal, this membrane is passing action potential, what will happen? This will go from minus 70 to the plus 30, and that going from minus 70 to plus 30 is actually depolarization step up action potential. And that we can see over here that this is the depolarization, that the positive charge is going inside. Normally what happened during depolarization, and repolarization, and the whole action potential. Action potential is having two main steps. I'm going to write it in detail. Action potential is having two main steps. Number one, the depolarization, and number two, the repolarization. What happens in depolarization and what happen in repolarization? These are two basic steps of the action potential. What happens in depolarization and what happens in the repolarization? This can be explained from the molecular level, that this is a membrane, and this membrane is having number of channel, large number of channel. This blue color channel represent the voltage gated channel. This blue color channel is also voltage gated channel, and this blue color channel is also voltage gated channel. This is also voltage gated channel. But some of these voltage gated channel are sodium voltage gated channel, and some of these are potassium voltage gated channel. This should be kept in mind, that this is sodium voltage gated channel and this is potassium voltage gated channel. Again, this is sodium voltage gated channel and this is potassium voltage gated channel. And the voltage gated channel, the speciality of the voltage gated channel is that it will get open if it come in contact with the voltage, if it come in contact with the charge, if it can come in contact with an electric potential or action potential. So what will or with a stimulus having the intensity greater than 15 millivolt or equal to 15 millivolt, what will happen? This voltage gated channel will get open. Voltage gated channel are always open, or during the active stage of the neuron. The voltage gated channel are always closed during rest stage of or resting membrane potential of the neuron. The voltage gated channel are closed, and during the active stage of the neuron, the voltage gated channel are always open. uh, Now the green color channel represent the leak channel. The leak channel are always open throughout the life of the neuron. That may be at rest stage, that may be at active stage. Whether the neuron is at rest or at active stage, this leak channel will be open. And this leak channel is for sodium, and this leak channel is for potassium. For sodium, the leak channel has been shown as a small channel, and for potassium, the leak channel has been shown a bit larger, because the leak channel of potassium is very active, or pass large number of potassium as compared to the leak channel of the sodium. The leak channel of sodium um, always pass the sodium from the external environment to the internal environment. It always transfer the sodium from external environment to the internal environment, but in minute amount, in minute quantity. And the leak channel of potassium always transfer the potassium from internal environment to the external environment, but not in minute amount. It transferred in large amount during rest stage of the neuron, and during active stage of during each and every step of the neuron. So these are the leak channel which remain open throughout the life of the neuron. And this is the sodium potassium ATPase pump. This is sodium potassium ATPase pump or ATPase channel. You can also call it channel. This work actively, and this remain active when the neuron is going from active state to the resting state. When the neuron is going from active state to the resting state, this remain active. And when the neuron is at rest, this is at rest. And when the neuron is going to from active state to the rest state, then this sodium potassium ATPase pump is active. What do the sodium potassium ATPase pump do? This use ATP for the transfer of sodium from the internal environment to the external environment actively. by the consumption of ATPs. It transferred the ATPs from the it transferred the sodium from internal environment to the external environment, and it also transferred the potassium from the external environment to the internal environment. By the transfer of each three sodium, the two potassium will goes in. When it pump out three sodium from internal environment to the external environment, the two potassium will also comes from the external environment to the internal environment. This is mandatory that by the transfer of three sodium from internal environment to the external environment, the two potassium will be transferred from the external environment to the internal environment, and these goes actively, and this help in the maintenance of the resting state, or this help in the achieving of the resting state from the active state. It make the external environment positive, and it make the internal environment negative. So when the internal environment become negative and the external environment become positive, this shows the resting state. And active state, during active state, the internal environment become positive and the external environment become negative. The internal environment become plus 30 in the active state. So what happen during action potential? During action potential, a stimulus will stimulate these voltage gated channel, and these voltage gated channel get opened when the intensity of the stimulus is greater than 15 millivolt. If the intensity of the stimulus is greater than 15 millivolt, what will happen? This stimulus will open the voltage gated sodium channel, not the potassium channel. Only the sodium channel will get open, and when the sodium channel get open, the sodium, which is very in large quantity in the external environment, will rush into the internal environment. The external environment is always rich in sodium and positive charge, so all the positive charge will rush from the external environment into the internal environment, and this rushing of the sodium from the internal environment, from the external environment to the internal environment, will will make what? It will make a peak over here, this one. it will make it will make the internal environment very positive. It will make the internal environment from minus 70 to plus 30. So this rushing up the internal environment from minus to plus, from minus 70 to plus 30, this stage is called depolarization. Depolarization is actually the conversion of minus internal state into positive internal state, the conversion of negative internal state into positive internal state. This is depolarization. Depolarization is actually the conversion of, and this is a brief conversion. This conversion is for millisecond. This conversion is very it's for very short time. When the internal environment become positive for very short time and the external environment become negative for very short time, and the voltage on the voltmeter we can see goes to plus 30. This is called depolarization. This depolarization is one of the step of the action potential. The second step of the action potential is repolarization. This is the step which is repolarization. In the repolarization, what will happen? Now coming toward this diagram, in this diagram we can see that we have potassium, voltage gated potassium channel, and voltage gated potassium channel open a bit late from the voltage gated sodium channel. When the voltage gated sodium channel become closed, the voltage gated potassium channel become opened. And when voltage gated potassium channel become open, what is the function of the voltage gated potassium channel? It will leak out all the potassium from the internal environment to the external environment. It will leak out. The function of the potassium channel or voltage gated potassium channel is to leak out the potassium from the internal environment to the external environment. The function of the voltage gated sodium channel uh, was to transfer the sodium from the external environment to the internal environment and make the internal environment positive, while The function of the voltage gated potassium channel is to leak out the potassium from the internal environment to the external environment and make the internal environment negative, comparably. So this leak out of the potassium, abrupt leak out of the potassium by the opening of the potassium voltage gated potassium channel will do what it will it will do what it will it will give a very big shift from the positive towards negative. And this shift from positive, from plus 30 to minus 70, this is called repolarization, because the membrane is again polarized. The membrane will go again polarized. The membrane will become polarized again. So this is a polarized membrane, and this is a depolarized membrane, because here there is a depolarization. So the membrane will once again become repolarized. So this repolarization is to bring back this needle from plus 30 to minus 70. This bringing back of needle from plus 30 to minus 70, or bringing back of the potential from plus 30 to minus 70, that is called repolarization. And that repolarization occur with the help of what? Uh, with the help of potassium channel. This this line has been given by the potassium channel, voltage gated potassium channel, and this has been given by the voltage gated sodium channel. In some of the muscle, the sodium potassium 80 phase pump also help in the shifting up this charge from positive to negative. The sodium potassium ATPase pump also help in the conversion of internal environment from positive to negative again. But in a lot of neuron, in large number of neuron, the internal environment become negative with the help of only potassium pump. Now, what will happen when it become minus 70? What will happen again over here? The potassium pump are the potassium, the leak channel are open. The leak channel are still open. So the leak channel will do what? The leak channel will transfer the potassium from the internal environment to the external environment. And the leak channel of sodium will transfer the sodium from the external environment to the internal environment. But this is very minute amount of sodium, which come by the leak channel of sodium. And the leak channel of potassium will leak out a lot of potassium from the internal environment to the external environment. So that the leak channel uh, will make this one. It will decrease the electric potential from minus 70 to up to minus 90. It can reach up to minus 100. So this decrease in the electric potential of the internal environment due to the leak channel, or due to the further repolarization, this is called hyperpolarization. So this hyperpolarization occurs after every action potential. After this is active potential, this is action potential. Action potential is actually the depolarization and then repolarization. And after each repolarization of the action potential, a hyperpolarization step is always there. This hyperpolarization occur when the leak channel are still open, and it push out all the potassium from the internal environment to the external environment. But at the stage there is a complete equilibrium, and that at that equilibrium the resting membrane potential is achieved when the potassium leak pump and the sodium leak pump push out equal amount of sodium, or when the internal environment become minus 70. So that is actually this stage. So this was all about the action potential. Now coming towards the node of Ranvier. What is the function of node of Ranvier? Node of Ranvier is actually the non-myelinated part of the neuron in the peripheral nervous system, the central nervous system. The non-myelinated portion of the neuron is node of Ranvier, and this is called internode, where there is myelination. So what is the difference between the non-myelinated and myelinated form? When the action potential travel from this area to this area, so the action potential transfer the in the form of the channel, voltage gated channel. Voltage gated channel get open from this side to this side, and this voltage gated channel goes and goes and goes. When it reaches over here, what will happen? You know that the external environment is very rich in sodium, especially sodium. The external environment is very rich in positive charge, and especially that is sodium. While the internal environment is very rich in protein, which are mostly negative charge. So the internal environment is considered negative because of the presence of protein and large number of negative charges also. But the external environment is considered very positive, and the sodium ions are in large amount always or here in the external environment. But the sodium which are over here in the node of Ranvier and over here in the node of Ranvier can interrupt the action potential. How can they interrupt? They can interrupt because when the action potential reaches at this point the voltage gated channel get open, and when the voltage gated channel at this point get open, the sodium from the external environment will rush into the internal environment. The sodium from external environment will rush into the external environment. Still, when the action potential transfer from this area to this area, the sodium also rush from this external environment to the internal environment. But over here, the sodium are in very minute amount, which can only transfer the signal, which can only transfer the action potential. But when this action potential reaches over here, what will happen? This will open a lot of channel over here, and those channel will pass the sodium from external environment to the internal environment. What will happen when the lot of sodium get into the internal environment through the channel, because the channel are opened over here? Normally these sodium cannot pass this membrane. Normally this sodium cannot come from the external environment to the internal environment. It can only come when there is an action potential. When there is the opening of voltage gated channel, then the sodium from the external environment goes into the internal environment, and that sodium goes from the external environment into the internal environment. It will make a very intensity or intensified action potential, and that intensified action potential will jump from this area to this area, and this jump from this area to this area, this will be in very short time, because the large number of sodium come in large number of charges will make a very intensified electric potential, or a very intensified action potential, and that will be transferred from this area to this area in a brief time. Once again, when it reaches over here, uh, the sodium from external environment will again go to the internal environment with the help of open channel. When the channel get open, that will rush into the internal environment, and once again there will be a big jump from this area to this area. And when it reaches over here again, this while traveling to the myelinated form or to the myelinated part, the intensity become dampened. But when it reaches over here, again this intensity is again intensified. The intensity of the action potential is again exaggerated, and that exaggerated form of action potential, when it transferred through the nodes from this node to this node, that is called saltatory conduction. This form of conduction from this node to this node in the form of jumps, that is called saltatory conduction. I'm going to write it. With saltatory conduction. Saltatory conduction is actually the conduction in the form of saltair. Saltair mean to jump. the conduction of the action potential from one node to another node in a form of jumps and in the intensified form. So the what is the function of node of Ranvier? The function of the node of Ranvier is to intensify the action potential uh, and uh, and avoid the dampening of the actual action potential. If there was no if there was no node over here and the whole axon part is myelinated, what will happen? This action potential will be transferred from this area to this area, but it will not reaches to the final stage. But again, if it reaches to the final to the axonal terminal, what will happen? This will be in very dampened form. So to avoid the dampening of the electric signal or to avoid the dampening of the stimulus, what is there? There is a node of Ranvier, and node of Ranvier help to intensify the action potential and to make the signal very to make the signal to transfer to get transfer from one part to another in a very short time in a very intensified form. So this is the function of the node of Ranvier.